Man, how great is that movie, right? I wanted to be Indiana Jones when I was younger, until I found out, unfortunately, that's not a real job. But if you are like me, and you were a starry-eyed kid, and you don't want reality to crush you, I was able to track down 10 insane treasures that you can still actually find right now.
Mr. President, show me the money.
So the treasure of Lima is real pirate treasure. It's pretty cool. The story goes that in 1820, Peru was gearing up to go to war, and the viceroy of Peru decided that the treasure...
Go!
So to get rid of it, he enlisted the help of a captain named William Thompson, who had a ship called Dear Mary. And basically what he was supposed to do was he was supposed to take the treasure from Peru, put it in Mexico until the war, skirmish, whatever was over. Unfortunately, as these things often go, Captain Thompson had different ideas. And once the missionaries were on board with the treasure,
there are no survivors.
Thompson and his crew were actually captured after burying the treasure, and they were convicted of piracy. But in exchange for leniency, Thompson and his first mate decided that they would bring them back to the treasure so that they could get it. Unfortunately, we are talking about pirates, and once they were on the island, in the Cocoa Islands, they escaped.
Lost another one.
Now, for anyone saying it's all rumors, everything like that, in 1844, a man named John Keating did lead an expedition claiming at one point in his life he had befriended this notorious Captain Thompson. But unfortunately, with the exception of a couple gold coins, he was never able to recover the treasure. So my money says it's still out there for one of us to find.
Drink up me hearty Joe.
If you haven't heard of Leon Trabuco's gold, don't worry. Hidden treasure doesn't stay hidden long if everyone knows about it. But these are the details to this one. During the height of the Great Depression, Leon Trabuco and at least 3 to 4 other men began buying Mexico's gold reserves in hopes that gold would skyrocket during the Great Depression when the government started buying it back. This was technically illegal to do, so what they did was they enlisted the help of a man named Red Mosier, a plane pilot, to fly the gold from Mexico to the New Mexican desert. Over the course of 1933, he flew 16 flights, supposedly carrying 1 ton of gold each trip. Like you'd expect, it worked like a charm. When the government began buying up gold, Leon and his cronies were looking at a $7 million profit on the gold that they had. Unfortunately, with the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, private gold ownership also became illegal.
Can I do that?
So they basically had all this gold that they couldn't sell because it was technically illegal. And within 5 years, at least 3 of the co-conspirators died. And with gold not being legal to own again until 1975, Trabuco had literally tons and tons of gold he couldn't sell.
Oh, I don't think I'm a lot dumber than you thought that I thought I was once.
So, because of Red Mosier, we know that the gold exists, but we just don't know where because it was taken off of his plane and put onto trucks to be put in a different position or location. But it's still out there, so check New Mexico or the surrounding states if you want to hit pay dirt. The Flor de Lamarr was a Portuguese sailing vessel which was in service for 9 years, finally meeting its demise on November 20th, 1511. While it was sailing through the Indian Ocean with, let's call it borrowed treasure from the Sultan of Macau, it came into a very, very rough storm, and it wasn't able to stand up to the tests of the ocean.
Captain Insano shows no mercy.
Now, shipwrecks are quite common, especially from the 15 and 1600s, but the Flor de Lamarr was not a common ship. With a height of 118 feet and a length of 111 feet, and a gross weight of 800,000 pounds, this ship was double the size of any other ship at the time.
Behemoth?
Now, it is a $3 billion treasure, but sinking off the Timia Point in the Kingdom of Aru, which is now modern-day Sumatra, 3 different countries lay claim to the treasure once or if it's ever found. And I gotta be honest, that sounds like a big headache to me.
I'm out.
But feel free to look for it if you're into headaches.
Here, take 2 of these.
Montezumas Gold. I can never seem to find that, but I can always seem to find his revenge when I'm in Mexico.
I'm a clown, I amuse you.
When Cortez and his men entered the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1519, they were treated like gods.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Just like the proverbial mouse who wanted his cookie, Cortez and his men decided they wanted more gold and silver. Enlisting the help of Aztec enemies, they were able to ransack the capital of Tenochtitlan and actually put Montezuma himself on house arrest. This still wasn't enough, but eventually the Aztecs got fed up and fought back, killing Montezuma in the process. In their retreat from Tenochtitlan, Cortez and his men decided that the best place to dump all their stolen loot would be in Lake Texaco. With more reinforcements, Cortez and his men searched the lake but found no actual treasure. Since then, it's also been searched and there's still no treasure. No one knows exactly what happened, but there's an oral tradition that says 2,000 men went into the lake to retrieve the gold, and along with Montezuma's body, marched as far north as possibly southern Utah.
34. Yeah, a lot of history on that rod.
So, maybe people are just looking in the wrong spot. Now, I know Nazi treasure has bad juju, but I don't want to exclude any facts because that's what I'm here to bring you. Lake Toplitz, where this treasure is supposedly located, is a very tiny, narrow lake up in the mountains, which is only 300 feet deep at most, and is only accessible via a very small dirt path.
Missed it by that much.
If it wasn't excluded enough, it's also only accessible for 5 months out of the year.
There's some kind of force field.
But I can hear you saying two things right now. One, Q, why is your beard so magnificent?
I brush my hair 100 times.
And two, if it's so small and people can just get to the lake, how come no treasure? Well, I'll tell you. Once you get below the 60-foot freshwater mark, the water gets extremely salty and there's almost no oxygen, which means that any trees that have fallen or any debris that has fallen into this lake in the past just kind of sits there and creates a barrier. And some trees can be pretty hard to get past. And for those who have taken on the mission of searching for the treasure, people who had worked at the lake for the Nazis previously, they've been found dead, and not by natural means. We're talking like gunshots to the head and stuff, and that just doesn't happen. So if anyone is saying, well, then obviously there's no treasure there, at one point after World War II, there were 700 million British pounds found in the lake, which Hitler had printed to distribute into the British economy and effectively tank it. So there's got to be something to it. It's just a matter of time before we find it.
Sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip.
The Awa Maru was a Red Cross relief ship sunk in 1945, but while it was still above the water, it had been going back and forth between the US and Japan in relief missions. While docked in Singapore, it was supposed to go back to Japan, carrying about 2,004 people, diplomats and whatnot, and about $5 to $10 billion in treasure. However, when it was passing through a certain point, it was actually struck by a U.S. submarine called the Queenfish. Now, the U.S. military had sent out a signal to let this ship through.
It's an older code, sir, but it checks out.
Because of storms at the time, the Queenfish never got the official memo to let the Awa Maru pass, and instead sent 4 torpedoes, which were all direct hits, sinking the ship. Only one person survived from the massacre, and the 2,003 other passengers perished. Years later, China actually searched for the treasure, but to no avail. In 1981, the U.S. government, declassified documents saying that it was actually a miscommunication and that in Singapore they had dropped off all the treasures. Now, I love a good conspiracy theory, and this sounds like one. You guys are allowed to think what you want, but as for me, I believe okay, so for this one, we're not talking about the fabled city that Disney put on the map. We're really talking about how the Muisca tribe of modern-day Colombia would indoctrinate their kings or new leaders, where they would dust him in gold powder, and then they would float him out into the center of Lake Guatavita, and they would throw gold items, idols, coins, everything that they could into the lake in his honor.
All right, well, don't waste it.
In 1514, 2 conquistadors found gold on the lake shores and tried to drain it completely, but their attempts were unsuccessful. That's one famous attempt, but another one actually led to the death of Sir Walter Raleigh's son, and subsequently, when Walter Raleigh got back to England, he was also executed for being down there and, drawing swords with the Spanish. Those are the two most famous cases of people trying to get to the bottom, but no one can any longer, because in 1965, the Colombian government decreed that the lake is a protected area.
Hey, you can't go in there.
Just watch me.
So if you've ever read anything on Russian royalty, you're probably pretty familiar with the Romanov family. How they were czars, how they were vastly wealthy, but do you know how wealthy? When they were unseated in power in 1917 by the Bolsheviks, an estimated $45 to $60 billion fortune was displaced.
And it's gone.
Now, we know that the Bolsheviks sold some of it to finance the Russian Revolution, and we know that some things have been found, like the Fabergé eggs, for example. Recently enough, the KGB has actually declassified documents naming 5 possible locations where the Romanovs may have hid their fortune.
The KGB will ever know him.
Other people say that the Romanovs sunk the treasure themselves into Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world.
Okay, good. What's the problem?
To this date, there has been no official search of any of the 5 places listed in the KGB documents. So the missing treasure in this case is just that, still missing. So, who was Herer and why have you never heard of him? Well, he was the high priest of Anubis at Thebes, and in some texts was actually regarded as just as powerful of a ruler as Ramses the 11th. So, pretty powerful guy. But, what about his treasure? Well, I threw this one in as a curveball because, to be honest, it can't be confirmed. But, I've watched The Mummy, I've seen ancients behaving badly.
I drink, and I know things.
The reason it's been alleged that Heror could have this massive treasure accumulated is because he was responsible for all the burial of the pharaohs in Egypt, which, if you need to be spoon-fed, means he knew where all the booby traps were and he could come and go as he pleased.
My boy's wicked smart.
Now, there's 63 tombs that are known of in the Valley of the Kings, including King Tut's. So, it's not known how much he might have stolen, if he had stolen anything, but if they ever do find his tomb, well,
It's gotta be biblical.
Alright, finally we come to the big man. The treasure of Padma Hamashawabi. Again, I hope I got that right, it's not my native language. But with $1 trillion estimated total of value, I know what you gotta be thinking, and this is my answer to you.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now, the treasure that's located inside the temple has been accruing for thousands of years. There's even coins from the Roman emperor in the BC era. 6 vaults that exist in the bottom of the temple, labeled A through F.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Due to rampant corruption in the Indian government, the Supreme Court actually issued an order that Vault A be opened in order to do an audit and then closed back up.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
But of course, that leaves Vault B, and that is the superstar, the big dog here. The reason it hasn't been opened and no one knows what's inside is because, 1, there's curses placed on it, death upon whoever actually opens the door. 2, the priests that have interpreted the door and the gigantic snake therein, or thereon, is said to be a bad omen. And 3, there's also supposed to be Yakishi, which are said to live inside, which are actually the Hindu equivalent of vampires.
Blah, blah, blah.
It should also be noted that the $1 trillion price tag, when appropriating for cultural significance, is actually considered to be quite conservative for this treasure.
Excuse me? A baking powder?
Hey guys, I just want to thank you for checking out this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, be sure to subscribe. If you didn't, leave me a comment on something I can do better. Always looking to improve. Anyway, Monday is going to be my upload day, so I hope to see you next week for the next video. And give me some guidance with what you'd like to see in the comments below, because let's be honest.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?